Obviously. They don't pile. Yeah. Oh.
All right, we are picking up where we left off last week in chapter 32 of Isaiah, if you want to turn there. The last two verses of chapter 32. And after we finish these two verses, we will be halfway through the book of Isaiah. I haven't been keeping track of how long it's been since we started, but a couple weeks. Maybe it's a few more weeks than that. But we're in chapter 32 here, verses 19 and 20, and we've seen how in the previous chapters that living a life that is centered around God results in true peace, results in righteousness and spiritual fruit. And we saw that in just in this past chapter, 32, verses 1 through 18. And I wonder if you guys remember, or if you've ever played around with those flight simulators. Ever played with the flight simulator on the computer? I remember in high school, in our technology lab, we had one of those computers with it was sitting on top of a box with a yoke, facsimile of a yoke, and then you had various switches on there for the fuel, the landing gear, and all of that. And the basic idea of that being, it's pretty lifelike. If you are to sit down at this computer and flip your fuel on, and then pull the throttle up and get going just like you would a real plane. You get up your airspeed and you'll take off. Flip that switch for the landing gear, pull that landing gear up, and you're on your way just like a real plane, right? And even today, and you might have the mission of finding an airport elsewhere, and you have to go land it. So you have to go bring your airspeed down and get it just right, get the angle just right, and flip, get the landing gear down and land and feel that feeling of accomplishment that you have just landed that plane. And you might feel as though you were flying a real plane, right? Today, you even have, I want one of these, you have the virtual reality, the VR headsets. And they have a game that I want where you're flying World War II airplanes, actual World War II missions. And so you've got it on your face and you feel like you're in the moment. You're in your P-51 flying in formation, you're guarding your B-52s, and then you see your German Messerschmitts off to your 8 o'clock, and so you have to go after them, and you're feeling in the moment, and the graphics are very lifelike, and I want one really bad. But and you might feel the rush. You might, if they got to where you could simulate the G's, that'd be pretty cool, I think. Yeah. But now let me ask you, they'd probably, I think they actually do, but I can't afford it. A VR headset's pretty, might be out of my price range itself. But could I call myself a pilot if I landed a plane in a simulator? Could I call myself an ace if I got a certain number of kills as a fighter pilot? I couldn't do that because I didn't really fly a plane. But I simulated it. I simulated it, right? And I wonder how many people are simulating the life of a Christian, right? I wonder how many people are, with, as I said, with the VR headset, if you were sleeping and you woke up and you had that on your face, you might be fooled as though you're actually in an airplane. And sometimes maybe we are fooled into thinking we're actually living a Christian life when we're just simulating it. We're living a God-centered life because we're doing this and we're doing that, but internally, the heart's not in it. And that's where Judah was. That's where Judah was in Isaiah's day. So a life that is simulating a life that is centered around God may result in a simulation of righteousness, may result in a simulation of peace. There are a lot of people walking around that feel like they have peace in their lives when their lives aren't centered around God. How do you reconcile that when speaking to them? That you may have simulated spiritual fruit, but as the vineyard in Isaiah, end up with wild grapes. So a life that simulates a life centered around God only simulates those things to the person. I wonder if somebody could read for me Matthew chapter 7, verses 21 through 23.
Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, even does the will of my Father. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness.
All right, thank you, brother. So outward profession does not equate to inward submission, does it? Outward profession does not equate to inward submission. A simulated, that those people in that verse had a simulation going on. They believed that simulation, and they found out the hard way that it was a simulation. Someone, 2 Timothy 3 and verse 5, please.
Out in the form of godliness, but having denied the power thereof, these also turn away.
All right, so that form of godliness, what was it? It was external. It was an external pattern. And these people Paul is describing are living without God as their center. And so it's performance. It's performance and not presence that they're demonstrating here. So you have a form that's an external pattern, which they don't have power, the power which equates to inner reality, or the reality of one's transformation inwardly. Matthew 15 and verse 8, please.
These people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me.
All right, thank you. So a lip service, it's you're simulating your allegiance, your devotion to God, but without the heart, that's empty. That worship is empty. We see in Revelation chapter 3 and 1, 3 and verse 1, the church that was in Sardis appeared to be vibrant. They appeared to be busy. They appeared to be active in the Lord's work, but they were lifeless, as our Lord describes there in Revelation 3 and verse 1. So what's the difference here? Simulation is an imitation, not a transformation. And one could even enjoy reputation because they're simulating a God-centered life. You have any doubt that there are people that are acting outwardly as though they're following God, that God is the center of their life when inwardly they their heart's not in it. So the reputation's there, but the relationship with God is not there. They're living in a simulation, just as we'll see that Judah was, Jerusalem was. We saw also last week that complacency is not the same thing as contentment. Slides are all out of order. Sorry about that. We'll probably see some things about complacency and contentment later. But there's a difference. Contentment is godliness with gratitude, as we saw in 1 Timothy 6 and verse 6. But complacency, as we know, that Isaiah calls out the women here in chapter 32. In verse 9 and following, rise up, ye women that are at ease. Hear my voice, ye careless daughters. New King James says complacent daughters. Give ear unto my speech. Many days and years shall ye be troubled, ye careless women, for the vintage shall fail, and the gathering shall not come. And so we talked about that last week. Complacency, the difference between complacency and having contentment with godliness. So in what way did Judah reject God? Well, they did it in many ways. We saw that Judah learned that the opposite of peace results when they reject God, when they do that through political alliances. And so we see the result of those alliances. It wasn't trust, it wasn't ease, as Ahaz might have expected, as the leadership of Jerusalem would have expected, but it was anxiety. It was anxiety. It was not peace at all. Looking back, chapter 30 and verses 1 through 7, if I could have somebody read 1 through 7 of Isaiah 30.
Carry out his plan, not mine. He made the light, but not of my spirit. They may seem to sin. You set out to go down to Egypt without asking for my direction. Take refuge in the protection of Pharaoh, seek shelter in the shadow of me. Therefore shall the protection of Pharaoh turn to your shade, and the shelter in the shadow of Egypt to your humiliation. For those whose officials are known, and his always great change. Everyone comes to shame to a people that cannot profit. That brings neither help nor profit. Shame and disgrace. An oracle on the beast they get. Through a land of trouble and anguish, from where come the lions and the lion, the adder and the flying fire serpent. They carry their riches on the backs of donkeys, and their treasures on the humps of cattle. To a people that cannot profit. Egypt's help is worthless in him. Therefore, I have called her Rahab, who says still.
All right, thank you very much. Isaiah 30 through 1 through 7. Woe to those that take counsel, but not of me, not of God, but of men, and those that put their trust in Egypt. For the Egyptians, as we just read, help in vain and to no purpose. So Judah's help is vain, it's empty. There's nothing in it. Instead of peace, what they experience instead is fear of betrayal, because you can't trust the ungodly, as they learned. They would experience the fear of being betrayed by these whom they've made an alliance with before. They would face crushing defeat. They would face national humiliation as a result of their alliance with Egypt. And so the takeaway here, human alliances, as we've seen, without divine approval, creates a false sense of peace. You know, in the 80s and the 90s, I believe, there was an effort with some associated with the Churches of Christ to reunite with the Christian church. Are any of you guys familiar with that movement? There's a movement called the Restoration Unity Forums. It took places between, I think it started in 84, and continued into the 90s. And what it resulted in was congregations of the Lord's Church erring and compromising the truth for a false peace, basically, a false unity. So they were prioritizing emotional unity over doctrinal fidelity, over truth. And that would have introduced instrumental music was one of the things, and a different organization to the church. All kinds of things resulted from that. And so there was a lot of people that were drawn away from that alliance, a human alliance. And today we might feel tempted to associate with those outside the church. Aren't we sometimes tempted to do that? Feel like we're kind of on the same page here. The enemy of my enemy is, or the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Is that yeah, something like that. We align with people and on a lot of subjects, don't we? And we might feel tempted to align with them fully, with those outside the church, those that are in error, as though we're on the same team. And we are not doing ourselves any favors if we compromise truth to align with them, and we don't do them any favors to pretend we're on the same team. We ought not to compromise the truth with those who are teaching error. It's about the same as Judah, Jerusalem, aligning themselves with Assyria first, and then Egypt, as we've seen in the previous chapters to this. We see political alliances produce anxiety, not peace. We've seen that injustice on the part of Judah. Let's look at someone read for us chapter 1 of Isaiah, verses 21 through 23.
How is it the faithful city become a harlot? She that was full of justice, righteousness lodged in her. But thy silver has become dross, thy wine mixed with water. Thy princesses are rebellious and companions of thieves. Everyone loveth bribes and followeth after rewards. They judge not the fatherless, neither doth the cause of the widow come unto them.
All right, thank you very much. So we have a leadership that is unwilling to to stand for justice, that is corrupt themselves, has aligned themselves with thieves, and has refused justice to those that deserve it, the fatherless. Neither does the cause of the widow come unto them. So we like to tout, or not tout, but people like to talk about social injustice today. Well, true social injustice was being done in Isaiah's day, and it bred mistrust. It bred violence in Isaiah's day. Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 6, seeing the moral decay of those in Isaiah's day. 2 verses 6 through 9, therefore hast thou forsaken thy people, the house of Jacob, because they be replenished from the east, and are soothsayers like the Philistines, and they please themselves in the children of strangers. Their land also is full of silver and gold, neither is there any end in their treasures. Their land is also full of horses, neither is there any end to their chariots. Their land also is full of idols. They worship the work of their own hands, with that which make their own finger, that with which their own fingers have made. And the mean man boweth down, and the great man humbleth himself. Therefore forgive them not. So social wrongs, injustice, moral decay in chapter 6, verses verses 6 through 7. Chapter 3, verses 4 through 7. And I will give children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them. And the people shall be oppressed, every one by another, and every one by his neighbor. The child shall behave himself proudly against the ancient, and the base against the honorable. When a man shall take hold of his brother, the house of his father, saying, Thou hast clothing, be thou our ruler, and let this ruin be under thy hand. In that day shall he swear, saying, I will not be an healer, for in thy house is neither bread nor clothing. Make me not a ruler of the people. So we have this moral decay running rampant. When the leaders have perverted justice for gain, the people were filled with mistrust, and the result of that is the peace among those people is vanishing. When your conduct when our conduct in our earthly relationships is not God-centered, we cannot expect to have the benefits of a God-centered relationship. Does that add up? When our relationship with someone on this earth, in this life, is not centered around God, we cannot expect to have the benefits of being in a relationship that is centered around God. That might seem obvious, but peace, trust, love, those are godly characteristics, are they not? And so if our relationship is not centered around God, how can we trust to have those things in that relationship? If we choose a mate, for example, without regard to where they are spiritually, without even considering where they are spiritually, should we expect a peaceful marriage? No. If our priorities don't align, we can't expect a peaceful marriage. It makes perfect sense to me. So the peace among the people in Judah, in Jerusalem, has vanished because they were not God-centered. They had not centered themselves around God. Then their moral decay here, as we've just read in chapter 2 and chapter 3, brought fear and insecurity. We see them adopting idolatry, the pagan customs and the practices of them. And then God, we see, allowed that chaos because they brought it on themselves. No longer are those that are competent ruling over them. He's made boys their princes, and everyone's oppressing one another, as he describes there. The result is a breakdown of order. We have civil unrest that's not peace, not the peace that results from a God-centered life. So we are free to replace God with whatever or whoever we want, but that's not without consequences. We are free to replace His standards with whatever we want. We could, for instance, replace the organization of the home with a different standard. We could imagine different gender roles or gender identities, and we could go against that one man, one woman for life, which is the prescription God gives us. And many do go against that pattern, don't they? We could replace that with any combination or permutation of things, and we should not expect peace from it. We cannot expect peace from it. We can't expect meaning from it. We can't expect to have fulfillment in it because God instituted and designed marriage. He designed the home the way it should be. We shouldn't expect peace if we don't pattern it after what He's given us. So moral decay, we can't expect that to bring peace. Can't expect anything from it but chaos and fear. We have false prophets in Isaiah's day. Wonder if somebody could read for us. It's quite a bit of scripture there. Isaiah 28 and verses 7. I'll start there. Isaiah 28, starting in verse 7. But they also have erred through wine and through strong drink are out of the way. The priest and the prophet have erred through strong drink. They are swallowed up of wine. They are out of the way through strong drink. They err in vision. They stumble in judgment. For all tables are full of vomit and filthiness, so that there is no place clean. And if you'll remember back when we talked about this, it was the religious leadership that was guilty of this, that he was addressing here. So we have false prophets bringing a calm that was deceptive to Jerusalem. We saw in Jeremiah's day how they said peace, peace, when there was no peace. This was a deceptive calming. And so the result of that would be that peace, what they thought was peace, would collapse in terror. You know, imagine if you had a doctor and you actually went for a physical, and he ignored every symptom, every failed test in your physical, and he just wrote you a clean bill of health. Are you going back to that doctor? Is that what you want? I want a clean bill of health, but yeah, I'd have to go to the doctor first. I heard my wife. I want a clean bill of health written, but I don't want them to lie to me about it, right? So we have these false prophets that were writing essentially a clean bill of health, and this is a leadership that fails to diagnose and treat the shortfalls of Jerusalem, and we have those leaders today, don't we? We have leaders that fail to treat spiritual shortfalls. And so their rebellion here invited foreign invasion, and we saw that in chapters 7 through 8 of Isaiah. We had King Ahaz refusing to trust God's promise of deliverance. Instead of looking to God, as Isaiah appealed to him to do, he appealed to Assyria, which later became Jerusalem, Judah's oppressor. And so the result of that is, instead of peace, Judah faced a constant threat. Ahaz thought he was doing so good making this alliance with Assyria. Assyria, of course, demands tribute, and Judah finds himself as a vassal state. So it's no fun being aligned to people you can't trust, is it? It's no fun. People you're constantly looking over your shoulder, worried about being betrayed by them. That's not a fun situation, and that's the situation that Ahaz and Judah found themselves in. Proverb chapter 1. Proverb chapter 1, verses 13 through 19. We shall find all precious substance. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in thy lap. Let me start at verse 10. My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. If they say, come with us, let us lay wait for blood. Let us lurk privily for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them up alive as the grave, and whole as those that go down into the pit. We shall find all precious substance. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in thy lot among us. Let us all have one purse. My son, walk not thou in the way with them. Refrain thy foot from their path. For their feet run to evil, and make haste to shed blood. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird, and they lay wait for their own blood. They lurk privily for their own lives. So are the ways of everyone that is greedy of gain, which taketh away the life of the owners thereof. So Judah aligns himself with Assyria, who is out for that blood. Judah thinks they can trust him for some reason. Why would we do that to ourselves? Why would we align ourselves with people who have not centered themselves around God? Why would we do that? Doesn't bring peace. Doesn't bring peace. We then have religious hypocrisy, leading to restlessness, getting closer to where we are. Did I say this was a recap? We're just recapping the previous, what we've gone through so far. Chapter 29, verses 13 and 14. Wherefore the Lord said, for as much as this people draw near me with their mouth, but with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. Therefore, behold, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among this people, even a marvelous work and a wonder. For the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent men shall be hid. So their religious hypocrisy produces restlessness here. And so God withdraws his blessing from Judah, from Jerusalem, and confusion is going to replace what was once clarity. This is going back to this simulated God-centeredness, to have this outward religion, but not have the inward devotion leads to spiritual unease. It doesn't lead to peace. So being at worship services, reading our Bible, having religious discussions with those without the church, those are great things to do, aren't they? But unless we're internalizing these things, unless we're applying these things to ourselves, we cannot expect to have peace. We cannot expect to have the peace that is promised to those that live by those things. When there is no peace, Isaiah, as we will see in chapter 57 and verse 21, no peace for the wicked, no peace for those that have not centered themselves around the king that we read of at the beginning of chapter 32. So every attempt to manufacture peace without God is going to result in instability. It's going to result in fear and injustice. So we shouldn't try to simulate a life of true peace. We need to live it. Stolen valor is sometimes stolen valor. You know, impersonating someone that has been in the services and has done a tour of duty in war or something like that. That you could fool some people. You're not going to fool everyone. You're not going to fool a Marine, and you might have the impression that stolen valor in God's kingdom is going to fool people, but it's never going to fool God, and you're never going to feel fulfilled from it. You're never going to feel that true peace. So that brings us to chapter 32 and verse 19. Any comments or questions? All right, so human-centered stability.
I tried to go back there and ring it, but it didn't work.
Oh, okay.
And Larry told me it's on.
Okay.
No, it's probably the timer wasn't adjusted. I thought Paul did it last week, but he might have just pressed the button.
I tried. Yeah, the magic touch.
The man.
Okay. So I was going to, when I heard that bell, I was going to jump to verse 19. So that didn't happen. We will pick up where I was supposed to pick up today, but decided to do a recap. And we'll pick up at verse 19. And then we'll talk about God-centered instability versus God-centered fruitfulness. Thank you all for your attention.
You know, I was thinking